I saw this lady on the television in a commercial and fell in love instantly. But I just watched her and I thought, that's the woman for me. At 93, I've lived long enough to understand that fame can make a man believe he has everything: money, success, beautiful women, and a name known around the world. But none of those things can tell you who will still be beside you when the applause finally stops. I learned that lesson the hard way. Before the woman who would become my greatest love, there was another marriage, another young woman, and a version of myself who was struggling just to survive. Her name was Patricia Haines. I was young, ambitious, broke, and convinced that becoming an actor would solve everything. It didn't. Looking back now, I can see that my first marriage taught me something success never could. Love can be lost when life becomes heavier than the people you love. Patricia Haines, my first love and the marriage I couldn't save. Before anyone called me Michael Caine, I was simply Maurice Micklewhite, a young man trying to discover whether I could make a living as an actor. After my national service, I worked in repertory theatre, first in Horsham and then at Lowestoft. It was there that I met Patricia Haines. She was an actress too, and in those days, we shared something precious. Neither of us knew where our careers were going, but both of us hoped they might lead somewhere. We married in 1954 and decided to go to London together. I imagined that was where my real acting life would begin. Instead, London gave me something much harder: uncertainty. Work was difficult to find, money was scarce, and I had to take soul-destroying jobs simply to keep going. I wanted desperately to become an actor, but wanting something and being able to provide for a family were two very different things. Then Patricia became pregnant. Our daughter, Dominique, was born in 1957. She was the happiest thing in our lives, but becoming a father also made my failures impossible to ignore. I couldn't give Patricia and Dominique the security I wanted for them. After about 2.5 years of marriage, Patricia took Dominique back to her parents' home. Eventually, our marriage came to an end. I was left with enormous guilt. I was out of work, penniless, and trying to find some way forward. My father was also seriously ill and unable to work, so I returned home and took a job in a steel yard. Then my father died, and shortly afterward, I lost that job too. There are moments when life seems to remove every piece of certainty you thought you had. That was one of mine, but I refused to stay there. I didn't know it yet, but the years that followed would transform my career, my reputation, and my relationships. And eventually, the world would begin to see me as a completely different man. Edina, Ronay, the woman who loved me before I was truly famous. After Patricia, I wasn't looking for another marriage. I was still trying to put my life back together, still chasing acting jobs, still wondering whether all those years of rejection would ever lead anywhere. Then Edina Ronay came into my life. Edina belonged to a world that felt very different from the one I had known. She was young, beautiful, Hungarian-born, and building an acting career of her own. We were together from 1961 to 1964, 3 years that happened just before my life changed forever. What makes me remember that period so clearly is where I was professionally. I wasn't yet the man from Alfie. I wasn't the international star people would later recognize. I was still working my way through television and theatre, hoping somebody would finally look at me and see more than a Cockney character actor. Edina knew me during that uncertainty. There is even a photograph of us together with Shirley Bassey at London's Pickwick Club in April 1964. Looking at images from those years now feels like looking at the final moments before everything changed. Because 1964 brought Zulu. That film put me in front of an audience that had never really noticed me before. Then came the Ipcress file, and suddenly the doors I had spent years pushing against began opening. But Edina and I didn't continue into that new life together. Our relationship ended around the same time my career was beginning its extraordinary climb. I don't need to turn that ending into some great tragedy. Not every woman who matters to you has to become the woman you marry. Some people belong to the bridge between two versions of yourself. Edina knew me while I was still crossing that bridge. Soon, fame would bring attention I had never experienced before. And with it came Hollywood, temptation, and women whose names were already known around the world. Nancy Sinatra, Natalie Wood, and Hollywood, the women who came into my life. By the middle of the 1960s, I had finally reached the place I had dreamed about for years. Zulu had opened the door, the Ipcress file pushed me through it, and then Alfie turned me into an international star. My official biography says that Alfie established me as a genuine star, and suddenly I was traveling to New York to promote films I'd once only dreamed of making. Fame brought something I'd never experienced before, attention from women who already belonged to the world I was entering. Natalie Wood was one of the women I was romantically linked with during those years. She was already a major Hollywood star, and simply being connected with someone of her stature showed me how completely my life had changed. Nancy Sinatra was another name associated with my bachelor years. Biographical accounts list both women among my romantic relationships, although the surviving public record doesn't give us enough detail to turn every connection into some grand Hollywood affair. That distinction matters to me, because the biggest mistake people made was confusing my life with Alfie. In 1966, I played a charming London womanizer who moved from one woman to another while avoiding emotional responsibility. The film became enormously successful, and suddenly audiences saw me as the ultimate ladies' man. But I wasn't Alfie. I enjoyed romance, I enjoyed beautiful women, I enjoyed being young and successful, but I also wanted affection. In a 1966 interview, I specifically rejected the idea that I lived like Alfie, saying I wasn't interested in one-night stands or constantly changing partners. The character became famous for avoiding love. I was still trying to understand it. Hollywood could give me attention, parties, excitement, and endless possibilities, but none of those things answered the question that mattered most. Who would I actually want beside me when the excitement was over? I didn't know the answer yet. I only knew that my bachelor life was about to enter its most complicated chapter. And somewhere ahead, completely outside my expectations, a woman was about to appear on a television screen and stop me in my tracks. Candice Bergen, Bianca Jagger, and others, the bachelor years I rarely talked about. By the late 1960s, I had become the sort of man people expected to see, surrounded by beautiful women. Fame had changed my circumstances, but it had also changed the way people looked at me. I was no longer the struggling actor wondering where my next paycheck would come from. I was a star, and London nightlife had become part of my world. Bianca Jagger entered my life during that period. We met in Paris, and she eventually moved to England with me. She was intelligent, striking, and ambitious, and our relationship lasted into the early 1970s. I remember those years as exciting, but I also remember how easily excitement can be mistaken for something deeper. Bianca and I eventually went our separate ways. Years later, she spoke critically about our relationship, describing me in ways that were painful to hear. I won't pretend every relationship I had ended perfectly. Some left affection behind, others left lessons, some simply left memories that became clearer with age. Then there was Jill St. John. Jill was another glamorous woman from that extraordinary Hollywood world. We were romantically linked in 1971 during a period when my name seemed to be appearing everywhere. But here's what people often misunderstand about those years. Being surrounded by beautiful women doesn't mean you have found the woman you want to spend your life with. I could enjoy someone's company. I could be attracted to someone. I could become fascinated by a woman and still not know whether she belonged in my future. The louder the parties became, the quieter that question became inside me. I was approaching my 40s, my career was stronger than ever, and I'd experienced enough romance to know that attraction alone wasn't going to give me peace. Then, in 1971, something happened that I never expected. I saw a woman in a coffee advertisement. I didn't know her name. I didn't know where she was from. I only knew one thing. I had to meet her. And for the first time, I wasn't chasing another chapter of my bachelor life. I was about to meet the woman who would change the ending of my story. Shakira, the woman who stopped me in my tracks. I had spent years meeting women in clubs, restaurants, studios, and parties. Then, one ordinary night in 1971, I stayed home with my friend Paul. We watched television, and an advertisement for Maxwell House Coffee appeared. Then I saw her. I didn't know her name. I didn't know where she lived. I simply knew I had never seen a woman who affected me like that. I told Paul, that girl, she's beautiful. I want to meet her. I even thought I might have to go to Brazil to find her. The next evening, by extraordinary chance, I met Nigel Pulitzer, who worked for the company that had made the commercial. He knew the woman immediately. Her name was Shakira Baksh, and she lived in London. Suddenly, the impossible woman on my television screen was only a few miles away. Nigel helped arrange contact, and eventually I got the chance to call her. I asked her to dinner. She told me she was busy and asked me to call again in 10 days. Those 10 days felt endless. When I called again, she agreed to meet me, but she would pick me up herself. When Shakira arrived, I opened the door and saw her properly for the first time. I was speechless. I remember taking her hand and feeling completely overwhelmed. I'd spent years learning how to perform in front of cameras, yet standing in front of this woman, I suddenly couldn't find my words. For once, I wasn't playing a character. I was simply a man completely captivated. We began seeing each other constantly. Then Shakira left for a modeling job in Mexico while I went to Malta to make pulp. We stayed in contact by telephone, and when her work finished, she joined me there. I had no idea that a television commercial would become the beginning of the greatest love story of my life. But it did. She was the one why Shakira became the love of my life. I had known what it felt like to lose love. I had known the excitement of being wanted, the thrill of meeting someone beautiful, and the loneliness that could follow when the excitement disappeared. But with Shakira, something was different from the beginning. We married in Las Vegas on the 8th of January, 1973. There was no grand spectacle. We chose a small chapel because neither of us wanted to turn our wedding into a performance. I had spent enough of my life in front of cameras. This was something I wanted to keep for myself. Later that year, our daughter Natasha was born. Suddenly, my life was no longer about the next party, the next film, or the next beautiful face. I had a family. Shakira also saw parts of me that fame had allowed me to hide. At one point, she pointed out that I was drinking 2 or more bottles of vodka a day. I had become so accustomed to that life that I hadn't even recognized how far it had gone. Her honesty shocked me. I stopped drinking for a year, and life suddenly felt completely different. She didn't simply admire me, she challenged me. That became one of the most important differences between Shakira and everyone who had come before her. We built our life around family, work, travel, and the quiet moments that never appeared in newspapers. We eventually spent years in Hollywood, then returned to England. Through every change, Shakira remained beside me. Even when my career disappointed me, she understood what I was feeling. My official biography describes our relationship as an extraordinary love affair, and that is exactly how I remember it. I had once believed the greatest romance would be the woman who made my heart race. I learned something better. The greatest love was the woman who stayed when life became ordinary. And after more than 5 decades together, I know exactly who that woman was. Shakira was the one. When I look back now, I don't remember my life by the films I made or the awards I received. I remember the people who stood beside me when nobody was watching. Patricia was part of my beginning. Other women became chapters in the story. But Shakira became the home I never knew I was searching for. I had spent years believing love was about excitement, beauty, and desire. Eventually, I discovered that real love is quieter. It is patience. It is forgiveness. It is choosing the same person again after life has changed you both. If there is one thing my life taught me, it is this. The greatest love isn't always the one that makes the most noise. It's the one that stays.